faith. It is a faith of peace. What a remarkable statement to make by a president, because we've seen just the opposite since by another president from his party. And he did great work when it came to global health. Extraordinary work. He changed the world for the better. And I was glad to be his ally in that effort. And that wasn't the sum total of all the work on the good side of the ledger that he'd done, and I won't recount the areas of disagreement because there were many. But I do want to tell you that I was touched, personally touched, by an article that President George W. Bush wrote in the Washington Post this weekend. It was about his new book, a collection of paintings entitled Out of Many, One. And he said in putting this book together, he was really setting out to accomplish two things: to share some portraits of immigrants, and he has become an accomplished painter, each with a remarkable story, he says, I try to tell, and to humanize the debate on immigration and reform. George W. Bush, a proud Republican, speaks not only to the people of America, but especially to his own political party in this article. I hope that these faces and stories that accompany them serve as a reminder, he writes, that immigration isn't just part of our heritage. New Americans are just as much a force for good now, with their energy, idealism, and love of country, as they have always been. He goes on to talk about some of the amazing stories. Story of a young man from France who followed his dream to become an American soldier and went on to earn the Medal of Honor. Story of champion runner who barely survived ethnic violence in East Africa and who told President Bush, quote, America has given me everything I dreamed of as a boy. He says the backgrounds of these immigrants are varied, but readers won't have to search hard for a common theme. President Bush writes, it's gratitude. So many immigrants are filled with appreciation. A spirit nicely summed up, he writes, by a Cuban-American friend who said, quote, if I live for 100 years, I could never repay what this country has done for me. President Bush writes, the help and respect historically accorded to new arrivals is one reason so many people still aspire and wait to become Americans. And then he asked the important question, how is it that in a country more generous to new arrivals than any other, immigration policy is the source of so much rancor and ill will? The short answer, he says, is that the issue has been exploited in ways that do little credit to either party. And no proposal on immigration will have credibility without confidence that our laws are carried out consistently and in good faith. One place to start, bless him, he writes, is DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. Americans, he writes, who favor a path to citizenship for those brought here as children, known as dreamers, are not advocating open borders. They just recognize that young men and women who grew up in the United States, who never knew any other place as home, are fundamentally American, and they ought to not be punished for choices made by their parents. Let me just add, thank you, President Bush. He speaks of our border, and he should. Another opportunity for agreement, he calls it. I've long said that we can be both a lawful and welcoming nation at the same time. He writes, we need a secure and efficient border, and we should apply all necessary resources to assure it. He goes on to say, we need a modernized asylum system that provides humanitarian support and appropriate legal channels for refugees. The rules for asylum should be reformed by Congress to guard against unmerited entry and reserve that vital status for its intended recipients. I don't disagree with a word that he has written. Increased legal immigration focused on employment and skills, and here we may have some area of disagreement, is a choice that both parties should be able to get behind. Temporary entry program for some workers. And listen to what President George W. Bush writes about the undocumented in America, estimated to be in the numbers of millions, 11 million. Here's what he says. As for the millions of undocumented men and women currently living in the United States, a grant of amnesty would be fundamentally unfair to those who came legally and are still waiting in turn to become citizens. But undocumented immigrants should be brought out of the shadows through a gradual process in which legal residency and citizenship must be earned as for anyone else applying for that privilege. Requirements should include work history, payment of a fine, back taxes, English proficiency, and other things. He closes by saying, if we trust those instincts in the current debate, then bipartisan reform is possible, and we will again see immigration for what it is, not a problem and source of discord, but a great and defining asset of the United States. I was touched by those words, and still am, that he would be so caring and so pointed in his message. That's the basis for bipartisan immigration reform, which America desperately needs. Now I'm looking for George W. Bush Republicans to join Democrats in a bipartisan effort to get it done. I've called together a group for that purpose, and we're going to meet again soon to talk about progress that we might be able to make. But I do want to thank the former president for speaking to the American people first and his own political party as well. We have a job to do, and we need to do it together. And I hope that we can do it following the values that George W. Bush still brings to the American debate. Madam President, I ask that a separate statement be placed